my favorite discourse on AI that people, they just fall into the trap without even realizing it. Very, very smart people who I love. They're like, it's crazy. When I ask ChatGPT about something that I don't know a lot about, somebody says something and I'm not sure I totally believe it, or somebody says I need to do something and I don't know how, and I go ask Claude. Claude gives me like a detailed analysis. It gives me a response. It gives me its sources. It gives me all this incredible information. And I level up in 5 minutes because I was able to learn so fast and I got such great output. But it's crazy. Whenever I ask Claude about something that I'm an expert in, it gets everything wrong. How strange that information you were unable to validate seemed like magic to you. But information you were able to validate, it's like, and the lack of awareness people have in that dichotomy.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between or beyond. I'm your host, Edwin Rydberg, and today I'm here with JP Prince. JP is the head of operations for a startup that builds AI agents. He spent 15 years in corporate America, where he helped a lot of people make a bunch of money, mostly by cleaning up their messes. And he lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, with 2 cats that provide endless dystopian inspiration. Hi, JP. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So you are yet another sci-fi author on the podcast who's come from IT,
Yeah.
which is
Turns
great. You write a lot of good stories, but is IT really still dystopian that you have to? I mean, to be
Sure.
fair, they're not all
Yeah.
dystopian, but a lot of them are either dystopian or apocalyptic. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's like I mean, I guess I could have started writing much earlier in my career. I always wanted to write, but very clearly, if you read anything I've written, like it's pulled a lot from corporate experiences. And especially, to your point, there's lots of sci-fi writers who come out of, even if they're coming out of journalism, there's corporate elements to that, or they're coming out of legit corporate America or engineering, software work. My particular bent on it is a lot of time, it almost sounds like I'm describing radioactive exposure, but a lot of time in venture capital and VC backed startups. It's where I've spent sort of the last decade. Even you saying like, oh, he works for an A startup, like I cringed and it's my job. Like it's actually my career. In other settings, I'm quite proud. In this one, I'm like, oh,
so I think we'll get into the business side a little bit later on the discussion. But I wanted to go. Usually, we talk about AI quite a bit later in the episode, but since that is your backstory,
yeah, yeah.
effectively, we get into it now, perhaps. So I was thinking of the first thing I wanted to know is sort of what's the bigger danger of AI? Because there's a lot of talk about job loss, but would it be job loss or resource depletion? I mean, there's lots of other dangers, but of those two, which would be a large? Because
Yeah,
there's a lot of water,
yeah.
electricity built on land, valuable land.
A technology is a tool at its core. AI is just like the first startup I built. We were saying AI, but we meant NLP, like natural language processing, and that was the big
Right.
ticket item. I used to not have a great way to explain why my first company failed, and now I just get to say, "Oh, we were trying to do AI in 2018." Everyone's like, "Oh, well, of course you couldn't have done that. Of course that failed because it wasn't time." But we AI is what we call things that don't work yet.
Okay.
So it is by its nature nebulous and scary because it has baked in it just the concept of AI, like the meme of AI, meme in like I guess that's the Dawkins sense, not in the modern meme sense.
Right. Yeah.
The idea, the concept of AI has within it danger and evil and scary. I think rightly. I made the migration from Twitter to Blue Sky to lose my mind a little less. And I saw a post on there the other day that was like, hey, I think the criticisms of AI are fair, but I think the criticisms of AI that are most salient have a very large Venn diagram overlap with criticisms of late stage capitalism. So the greatest danger or the greatest problem with AI is who is in control of it currently, who is telling the public about it, and what their motivations are. If this came out of, had it remained in academia, we probably wouldn't be quite as sick of hearing about it, right? But we gave it to the biggest hype machines in history who are not known for being honest about what they're building or what their motivations are, what the implications are. And paired with that, we have an administration that's pretty friendly to it right now, or at least, easy to convince to be friendly to it. So I would say the dangers of AI are the dangers of capitalism. If you strip capitalism away, I think we'd be a little bit less concerned.
Mm. That's interesting. So a couple of questions I had there. So did it come, as far as you're aware, then from academia? Because I know that we talk, and there's again, as
Yeah,
you were saying, there's lots of different kinds of AI. Like back in the 90s, there video games
sure.
obviously were like,
Yeah.
oh, there's the
Oh,
AI,
the
right?
AI, yes,
Which
it's
is
the, yeah,
yeah, it wasn't really an AI.
yeah.
And then had DeepMind and all the various AlphaGo and AlphaStar and all that stuff,
Yep. Yep.
AlphaFold.
Remember
Were they
AlphaGo? Wow, that's a blast from the past. That was like
yeah,
the
were
big
they
deal. Yeah.
significantly different from the modern AI? Like take AlphaFold, which is the protein folding version from DeepMind, which was 2018, I think it came on the scene. Was that significantly different from, let's say, what was launched officially in 2022?
I mean, I think that broad strokes, you're talking about like different modus operandi or like different waves of AI when we talk about AI. The latest one is very much, we're in the LLM era, right? The large language model era.
Right,
Um, how far you can trace that back depends on who you're asking, right? But LLMs essentially, it enabled hallucination, and the hallucination looks increasingly real, right? So it can
right, yeah.
hallucinate. It's just as hallucinations start to look very accurate, meaning like I can get usable code out of it. But it is just, to oversimplify it, it is not that different from a prediction engine that tells you what word's going to come next or tells you, tries to predict, what word you were trying to type. Like it is just pattern fitting. And like there's a lot more. And then there's like, I have friends in this space, right? So there's like, well, actually, no, it's a vector embedding, and they're embedding really a concept of meaning. And like, it's like, okay, great. That's very fascinating. But I think, yes, the technology is a step change. Also, the venture backed bubble of hype forging out ahead of it like a shockwave is what is really, that's what drives me up a wall. It's like, why are people so resistant to AI? It's like, well, they're spending billions of dollars to shove it down their throat. There are people saying with a straight face, if you do not adopt this tool, you're going to be left behind. It's like, that's not how anything has ever worked nor ever will. It is important to some people in some settings. But I work with two different companies right now. One is an AI firm selling AI to AI companies. They sell AI to Anthropic and Midjourney, which is ironic because in some cases they're just packaging Anthropic's tokens right back at them. Then I work with a company in elsewhere in the country that is doing youth sports tech. It's like, like literally the platform that you would register your kid to play volleyball. There's a lot of money changing hands. You can make money as a payment processor. Really and truly, the mission is incredible. We want kids to have community and we want kids to play youth sports. We want more kids to have access to youth sports. We want parents spending less time sending schedules and more times with kids. It's wonderful. It should feel like, you know, yin and yang, where it's like, well, this AI company, they're doing evil money grubbing Y Combinator. They're just want money. They're trying to sell money. And the other one should be like, altruistic. In reality, I lose my mind at the youth sports tech company more often because they're saying AI, you could just substitute the word Jesus
Okay.
because they're just saying, that's fine. No, whatever it is, we have AI. Like this company is all in an AI. If you're not using AI, you don't have a role here. You must be using AI. Otherwise, we are not fulfilling our promise to parents of children to be innovative. It's like,
So
actually, that's way more sick and twisted.
it's a magic box kind of weird
Yes,
thing.
it
Yeah.
is. I have family members who also work in startups and a lot of friends in the startup space. In some worlds, the people who are actually building the real stuff understand its limitations and where the actual money and opportunity is in the enterprise, let's say. The people at the forefront of the industry, OpenAI, Anthropic, to some extent DeepSeek, like, Grok is kind of an also ran, but like in those spaces, right? They are talking about it in a way that is indistinguishable from outright lying because they somehow have to turn billions of dollars lit on fire into billions of dollars later, and that will be hard to do. Somebody will pull it off, but certainly most of them will take a massive write down. And B, we will talk about it like we talk about the dot-com bust because not all the companies can win economically. There's companies really building things. A lot of them are on the coasts. There's companies selling tokens, and they are basically selling magic beans at this point. And they have a lot of circular investment and a lot of things that feel very bubbly. Then you have companies that are buying what those companies are selling, which is the idea that AI is here to stay and it's transformational. Unless you adopt it now, your company will fail and you'll be out of a job. Those people talk about it, especially non-technical people, executives. I work with a lot of executive teams and a lot of boards. Their language, I'm a language person, right, is more akin to religion than it is to any kind of technical expertise or understanding. They talk about it in euphoric, religious, reverent terms,
Yeah,
not in terms that fit business.
yeah, no, that's very interesting because I do feel there's a lot of new religions in our world right now
Yeah.
in many areas. It was interesting the comment about the capital and sort of the anthropic AI because I was listening to a YouTube video recently where the guy was talking specifically about that. So Anthropic with their recent like, oh, we've created this AI that's so powerful and so dangerous. And he was arguing that this was almost 100% a marketing ploy, right? Which
Yeah.
increased the value of Anthropic by threefold, I think it was within a
Yeah.
few weeks or a
Yep.
few months.
I have
Um,
built something so dangerous that you must give me more money to prevent its impact on you.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
apparently OpenAI did this some
Yep.
years ago, and then he said
Yep.
Anthropic has done it a couple times, or the same guy behind the marketing
Yeah.
for Anthropic. So yeah, so with that kind of thing going on, it's no wonder people are afraid
Yeah.
to
I mean,
use.
venture, I come from the VC world. Venture capital is a massive distortion of business and economics because it is, I'm going to make a broad range of bets. And I actually don't, we're going to play a game of hot potato. And as long as I'm not stuck holding it at the end, my limited partners get a return on their investment in my fund. We work in SoftBank, we're like this, right? Just don't be the one standing when the last chair is pulled away is the problem. So I have it's like I worked for a startup that absolutely the investors needed to take the money back. It clearly, they had been lied to. There had been misrepresentation. There was no progress. There was a lot of money wasted. Nobody was defrauding them, but money was being burned and no progress was being made. The investors needed to take the money off the table, but they didn't because you have to leave all of your bets in play on the off chance that one of the 30 investments you made out of fund 7 or whatever is the one to return the fund. Like the way that VC funds work is, there's a local fund here where I live. Okay, we've raised money. We don't have enough money to lead rounds. We can only follow, which means deal flow is very important. We have to just somehow squeeze our way in with dollars to deals that are already happening. We will make 30 investments. We hope that one of them returns all the money we put out. And therefore, any base hits we get, 2x, 3x, 10x exits, are just gravy. That's the returns. Because one investment we made paid back all the money we put in to everybody, and then a handful of them are going to actually generate returns. The problem with that is like, oh, okay, great. So, well, I've got a great base hit opportunity. I think that this could be 10 times as valuable. Do you want to come in? They're like, no, what are you talking about? I need 30 chances at a 1000x outcome. I don't want a variety of, I need every company. I need to look at, I need 30 chances at a unicorn,
Right.
knowing that the ones, most of them will just go to zero. One of them might become a unicorn, and there'll be a handful of like, well, you exited for 100 million, and that's enough, for us to generate some returns to our LPs. Also, even a VC fund started to be wonky about this. The life of a fund's about 10 years, so they invest all their money over 3 years, and then they expect to like wind down that fund or like, hey, everything that's going to happen has happened in 10 years. But they will raise another fund from their LPs a year and a half in. So even they are raising on hype. Look how far ahead my teams are at the end of the first quarter.
Right. It all
You know?
feels like a giant pyramid scheme, doesn't it? Basically,
It is.
it's like
It's
it's a
a
race to be stuck to be at the top before it all falls apart. Basically,
imagine a pyramid scheme in which actual money is actually returned often. How much more dangerous a pyramid scheme is that when there actually is real money?
yeah,
And some people do become quite wealthy, not just the people at the top. It is but it's really betting on the future, and it attracts a certain kind of person. Before we get off the topic of VC, there's a really excellent book I read on a vacation recently called More Everything Forever, written by a science journalist. And he ties together pretty effectively. I haven't read a critique of the book, but from just the book, it was like, oh, great, you've made a great argument here, tying together AI, longevity people who want to live forever, and effective altruists. And the effective altruists, and there's all these splinter groups and everything, but it's this weird cadre of wonky academics, influencers, and people with a lot of capital and business people, all united in a complete and total unself-aware fear of death and the fear of loss of control. Because if you have $1 billion, the only thing that could possibly be scary to you is losing control or dying.
right.
And so you have people with a lot of capital who fear only two things: not being listened to or dying. And so it's where you get, oh no, let's not fix problems on Earth, let's go to Mars, even though it probably is actually impossible to live on Mars.
Let's hope not. But
Yeah. It's
but
like, yeah.
so I mean, you're describing probably very well the Western way this is developing, and you do mention sort of the late stage capitalism
Yeah. Yeah.
aspect, but obviously China's rushing ahead with a lot of the things you describe as well. Not only the AI, the longevity stuff. I mean, they're clearly having reproductive issues just like we are in the
Sure.
West,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then they're pushing heavily the AI, which is sort of an arms race between them and us, more or less. So how does that factor in then in your view? Because you have
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously the capitalist side on one side, but then you obviously have whatever China is on the other side. I mean,
Sure.
theoretically
Yeah.
communist, but
Theoretically, I mean, comment, it's like depends on who you ask and who made the definition last.
right.
It's interesting. We'll talk about the book in a bit, but China, I made a very deliberate choice that in the future, I'm telling a story, from the Midwest, essentially, but the Midwest of the future after the collapse of the federal government and corporations becoming truly ascendant and in control. It's like, oh, well, that happened in the America of the future, in the world I've built in the book. I don't think it happened globally. I think it mostly was something that befell America because America really has nothing to fear except itself. America's full of like self-loathing in a way. Like we hate the things that make us America. So China would probably survive whatever global catastrophe that was, or whatever, rogue wave that affected the rest of the world. And what would they do? Well, in my world, they provide most of the food because China has found a way to make money. Like they found a way to build an economy, and they build that economy in large ways by serving the rest of the world, just like any globalized economy does. I think that, China understands you don't have to be first to market. You just have to have the best prices, and you just have to be competitive. And you need to be able to move quickly when it counts in a centralized economy. Not that, there's a tremendous number of terrible things happening in China, and the way that China treats its people overall, I think there's a lot of very valid criticisms I'm not qualified to go into, but I'm not making excuses for how they do things. It's more like, well, they can move pretty fast when they need to, and they have a central control point. What I would say is, uh, it's like the whole thing where it's like if you go far enough, let's say, talk in U.S. terms, if you go far enough right sociopolitically and far enough left, those people have some weird overlaps.
Yeah, no, they basically meet just on opposite sides
They
of the
meet on
same
opposite
issue,
sides
right?
in weird ways that are like
Yeah.
way more horrifying than a true moderate, if such a thing exists
Oh,
anymore,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
The Peter Thiels of the world would die to have the kind of control that China has over its people. They actually do want that. It actually is a bid for control. Like you can call it different mechanisms, but like there was, I mean, I hate to invoke he who should not be named, but like Elon Musk had a tweet that I saw on Blue Sky, somebody posted it, that was like, well, Hitler was really very far left. I'm like, what? It's basically a socialist. It's like, oh, but maybe. Also, that feels like a fairly horrific distortion
There's a
of,
big discussion there, but yeah.
yeah, it's like,
Um,
also, like, why is that? It's like the most salient thing that Elon Musk wants to say about Hitler is that the leftists in the US are a lot like him. It's like, oh, well, now we're just back to calling people we don't like Hitler.
yeah, both sides do that,
It's
don't
like,
they? They love that.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
come up with that a little bit
yeah,
later as well because that is something that I was thinking about.
yeah.
Yeah, our in the UK, I think our big tech bro that's probably effectively doing the most damage potentially is probably going to be Peter Thiel with Palantir. I
Yeah.
think they've just made a deal for
I
the
talked about
NHS
this,
data and stuff, but
yeah, which is horrifying. I talked about this today. I regret to say I have a friend, younger guy, but I have a friend a person I like who just took a job at Erebor. And I was like, Erebor, Palantir, Anduril, like, do they know? Surely they know and think it's funny that they're naming their companies after things in the Tolkien universe that were explicitly bad and evil. Like the
yeah,
Palantir
yeah,
was dangerous and bad.
yeah.
Like I don't know what it is. People with a lot of money who are beholden to no one love J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't know why. I don't know why, what the connection is, but there is something there, and they sort of love naming their companies. Even the names sound a little bit horrifying. And it's like, well, of course, a writer wrote them to sound dangerous and bad.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening. So I don't know. There's a number of questions on AI I still wanted to do, but we don't want to take up the whole discussion on AI.
Yeah, yeah,
So, because this is largely a writing podcast, a couple quick questions then about AI relating to authors. So, we were talking a little bit before we started about the attitudes that a lot of creatives
yeah,
have regarding AI. Now, some are embracing it as a tool. Interestingly, from what I've observed, it seems to be they're mostly embracing it, the part of it that does work that they can't do. In other words, authors will
yeah.
embrace it for cover design or maybe making trailers for their books, but not for writing typically. And I'm sure that,
Yeah.
everyone else does a similar kind of thing. So what's been your experience around
Yeah.
that? Because you're
Uh,
bringing your book out very soon,
yeah.
and yeah, you we were having an interesting talk about that.
Yeah. I'm a first time author. So, my debut novel, the audiobook will come out first. I believe it'll come out shortly before, people get to hear this conversation. I, in a lot of ways, detest AI because of how it's being marketed and because of how I think not in good faith. There are people having good faith conversations about the role of AI, and those people are largely being drowned out because I spend too much time on LinkedIn. It's a risk of the business that I'm in, right? Is you have to spend time on LinkedIn. And I think the way we're talking to people who are creative about it, it's like no wonder people are livid and want nothing to do with it. Because we're basically being told, well, embrace it or you won't have a career. It's like, I barely have a career to begin with as a creative. And now you want to take that away too? I saw a article from David Sedaris, and David's, who's, a nonfiction author I love. And David Sedaris was talking about, like, I want there to be a person on the other end of the book I'm reading because me reading a book you wrote or reading anything you wrote is really a conversation between the two of us that just I don't get to say a lot in, right? But the world, what I love is the idea that I was able to create a world and tell a story in it. And then if you read it, it will be a little bit different to you, maybe a lot different to you than what I was thinking when I wrote it. Like that is something that we get to share. And the idea that you would take a shortcut to get there doesn't make me more excited. It's like, no, no, I actually want to participate in that with you. So like I don't use it at all for writing because one, it doesn't write as good as I do. And two, the journey is the point of writing. The output is not the point. And I think I love the way you brought it up. Like, well, people can use it to become more well-rounded. People can use it to get a cover instead of having to pay a bunch of money. Maybe they can't afford to get a cover made. It's like, I would rather you draw a stick figure. That'd be more interesting to me because I want the thing you make. I want things made by people. I don't want things made by machines. And in line with the journey being the point, not the output being the point. my favorite discourse on AI that people, they just fall into the trap without even realizing it. Very, very smart people who I love. They're like, it's crazy. When I ask ChatGPT about something that I don't know a lot about, somebody says something and I'm not sure I totally believe it, or somebody says I need to do something and I don't know how, and I go ask Claude. Claude gives me like a detailed analysis. It gives me a response. It gives me its sources. It gives me all this incredible information. And I level up in 5 minutes because I was able to learn so fast and I got such great output. But it's crazy. Whenever I ask Claude about something that I'm an expert in, it gets everything wrong. How strange that information you were unable to validate seemed like magic to you. But information you were able to validate, it's like, and the lack of awareness people have in that dichotomy. It's like, actually, it's just hallucinating, sometimes accurately. But if you're unable to validate its outputs, I had a cover made for, I did a beta reader version. It's actually sitting on the bookcase behind me. I didn't know what I was doing, so I printed some actual beta reader copies. Like I've never written a book before, so I had no clue. And I handed them out, and people read them, and I got great feedback from beta readers. But in order to print a book, you have to do an interior design, and you have to have a cover. And so I did all that, and I paid somebody to make the cover. I did my own interior design. It was very ham-handed, but I paid somebody to make the cover using a website called Reedsy. That's like an Upwork for publishing, and it was really great. And I liked the cover a lot. I was like, this is good. I don't have to commit to it being final because this is the beta reader copy, but like it's so great. They really captured it. And then I was showing it to my friends. I have a Friday morning group. I'm meeting with them for a decade. I was like, I got this made. Isn't so great. They're like, hey, the cover kind of looks AI generated. And so I go back and ask. And of course, yes, that shop that makes book covers needs to make them very quickly. And so they use AI as a part of the creative process. And they're very upfront about it. And I didn't realize it. And you know why? I'm not an artist. I don't make things visually. I tell stories with words and sometimes with sounds. So I didn't even know what good was. And the risk here, and I see it every day in boardrooms and in executive teams, is the head of product is struggling. He's trying to get the team to move faster. He's trying to figure out how to deal with tech debt. And the CEO shows up and it's like, well, I asked Claude. And Claude gave me this very detailed plan of exactly how to do it. Here. Why aren't you listening? It's all solved. Here's the answer. And because the CEO is not a head of product, he doesn't realize that that's not helpful at all. He doesn't know what good looks like. So weirdly, when we want something made really well and we're really willing to spend money for it, we're happy to pay an expert. But I think the main thing AI is showing us is how little we value certain kinds of work and certain kinds of workers. It is laying that really bare for all to see.
Yeah, it's interesting, starting with the end comment on the art, how technology has dropped the bottom out of the market. I sort of got into cover design and digital art back about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
just kind of by
Yeah.
accident, just a little bit,
Yeah.
and the techie side. So I was using like the modelers, the
Hmm.
3D modeling stuff, and then Photoshop the result. Even that bit dropped the market, the bottom
Yep.
out of the market by
Hmm.
about tenfold from what artists were originally charging. And then now you add AI in, and basically the bottom of the market's gone completely.
Yeah. It should, well, it should be free. It should be
Yeah,
free. And it's like,
exactly.
well, there's a fantastic guy who does a daily, he's like my hero because he does a daily email. They're always very short, right? But like his whole thing is he's against hourly billing, which as a person who charges money for work, I love the idea that like, man, hourly billing, especially in an AI world, right? You're being punished for being better at your job if you're being paid by the hour, even though a lot of industries really do hourly billing. I think that's one positive outcome of the bottom dropping out of markets is we'll start to realize I should pay for value and pay for process more than I should pay for hours spent. And people ask him like, well, oh, you do a daily email. Wouldn't it be so easy? He has like all these podcasts, all these transcripts. He has all this work he's done. He has this mountain of content he's written about his world. You should just have AI write your daily emails. He's like, the point of writing the daily emails is to discover what I believe. That is the point of writing them. I write to discover what I think. And that is how I grow. Like writing the emails is the purpose. I think it is, if you don't value the journey, then of course just use an AI tool to generate the output. But there is meaning lost when you're using a system to regurgitate something that looks like something instead of going on your own journey. I, I'll put my business hat back on and be like, I live in a world and work in a world in which I do sometimes have to use these tools because it's an expectation of, weirdly, it's suddenly become okay to tell people how to do their jobs, just not what you want the outcome to be. It's become okay to say, well, you should use AI or else I don't think you're doing a good job, which is horrifying. But I have used AI in business settings only. And I think it is wonderful when the quality of the output does not matter. And unfortunately, in the business world, especially in large corporations, sometimes you have to make something and no one's going to read it. But as long as it's 20 slides long and is outcome shaped, you fit that key into the lock and the door opens and you're on to the next stage of the project. And it's terrible. I think what we will learn is why does quality matter so little that AI helps?
Yeah, that's a sad and I'm certain probably very accurate interpretation of the business world,
Yeah.
which is quite disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think that was an important note that, the journey, we're kind of losing that in this race, right? And it's kind of maybe it started with the internet, I don't know, but definitely social media and then the whole influencer thing and just kind of this race,
Yes.
race
Yeah.
and race to create content. It doesn't matter what it is as long as it gets attention. And we are losing the validity of the journey itself, aren't we?
Yeah. Not an intentional segue, but like when you write a sci-fi novel, you get to do a lot of thinking about. I once heard someone describe sci-fi as like, or speculative fiction in general. Let me take a thing that's present today and like move that fader on the board all the way up and then say, okay, what does the world look like if this thing goes all the way up? The thing for me is primarily corporate dominance, corporate control, which is a hallmark of cyberpunk writing, which I,
Right.
grew up reading. And it's like, oh, well, there probably would be something really cool. Like I call it the feed. Martha Wells also calls it the feed. Like the idea of like, oh, I've got some kind of augmentation or something that like it's the next version. iPhone was an incredible thing, and now we have watches, and now we have like, oh, well, now it's just like information being fed to us visually or via our ears, but it's all embedded into who we are. It's a very common
Neuralink.
trope. Yeah, very common trope in sci-fi,
Yeah.
not something I came up with. And I was like, well, in a world of corporate control, two things would be true. One, there would be an absolutely asinine number of ads because ads are the business model you create when you don't have a business model. Ads are like coverage for the fact that we don't know how things make money. So people pay for ads. Well, ads would be absolutely ubiquitous, and people with money would not have to see them. You'd have to pay for the privilege of access to things you already pay for the privilege to access.
Which is
But
exactly
people,
what's happening now
yes,
with streaming services, isn't it?
yep, yep. It's like, oh, I can pay for something and still have to watch ads. That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Like I pay that, whatever it is, 18, 19, $20 a month for YouTube Premium without blinking an eye because I really hate ads. Like I have very low tolerance for them. But I see other people watch services and they just sort of deal with the ads. Even the ads are like essentially disrupting the narrative you're trying to experience and
Yeah, well,
taking you
y-
out of the world you're in.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't pay for the premium version, but yeah, it's really bad. You will get sometimes mid-sentence, like
Oh, horrible.
mid-thought, it'll just like
Because
boom.
they're programmatically inserted. It's like there's a podcast I love called The Adventure Zone. It's a D&D podcast, actual play. At some point, the network they're a part of went from recorded ads, meaning like the podcaster, am recording the ad break, to programmatically inserted ads, which is great because even if I'm listening to an episode from 5 years ago, I get this week's ad, right? Even if the podcaster recorded it. What it does though, this podcast had beautiful sound design, and it sometimes absolutely wrecks this incredibly important moment because we had to fit the ads in and something went wrong and there was no human to correct it because it's important to us to use this week's ad, but not important enough to have a person go figure out where to put it.
Yeah, it's quite sad. I've often wondered, I mean, you can see companies like YouTube intentionally doing that to encourage people to buy the
Yeah,
premium
yeah,
version.
yeah. I'm going to cause you pain, so you pay me to relieve the pain.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
For someone like a designer or a creator for a podcast, maybe it's the same for Spotify or something, but I always wondered like why don't they just set up something that lets you pick where you want the ads to go? Now it probably is for the pain point,
I
but
think I actually have seen that before where it's like, hey, you can watch all the ads now. It'll be 3 minutes, but then you can listen to this whole episode ad free.
oh yeah, that's kind
Oh,
of
great. I
isn't
would
it
totally choose that.
Disney or something, I think.
I think I've seen it before,
Yeah,
but
but what I'm
it's
wondering
a
is like
yeah,
even throughout can't you like pick, okay, we'll put one here, we'll put one over there.
sure.
You
Yeah, yeah.
think it wouldn't be that difficult, but again, maybe they don't want to. I don't know.
You know, it's funny. I have a weekly poker game, and I had to buy a TV for the room the poker table is in because there's a huge overlap in poker players and people who really want to watch whatever the game is. And I don't know anything about sports, and so there was a game on Monday. So I was like, oh, well, it's saying I have to sign back up for like a 3 month minimum at this amount of money. And they're like, no, 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 it's not important enough. I was like, you know what's funny? I would have paid $10 to be able to have the thing on that you wanted to watch because I want to be a good host, and $10 is worth it for me to have something that you wanted to see. But my only option was a 3 month commitment because what they want me to do is once again forget I'm paying for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's so much gaming of the system. It's like, man, once you see like how the sausage is made on like subscription services or really anything with a recurring cost or anything designed to get you to buy or to forget that you bought, it really takes the wind out of your sails for making anything. It's like, oh, this is the world I have to live in.
Yeah, it is a bit frightening as a creator as well to see the kind of things you almost need to do to actually succeed. Like you're
Yeah.
saying, like
Yeah.
the games you have to play. And obviously, I'm not doing that. So my podcast has a reasonable number of listeners,
Sure.
but not a Joe Rogan level or
You
anything.
know, the most impressive thing that you have done that almost no podcast does is you kept releasing episodes. That's the real achievement.
I'm actually grateful I keep getting guests as well who want to be on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's excellent. Yeah, speaking so quickly on podcasts, because we want to get into your book actually.
Yeah.
You've had podcasts. So you started
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
podcasts during COVID, it looked like.
That and craft cocktails was like my pandemic rabbit holes, you
Does
know.
that kind of keep you sane during the lockdowns or
It
just
did,
something to
yeah.
do?
There were three podcasts. One is me and a buddy who had worked together and just liked hanging out and riffing, you know, dumb comedy podcast. But we were just pitching the world's worst startup ideas to each other. And it was very fun because it's a game we had been playing forever, you know, of like just kind of a send up of how dumb startups are, especially for young, wet behind the ears founders. Then there was one, the one that was the one I wished I could have kept doing was I was teaching people to play Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. It had to be people who hadn't played before, hadn't played since they were a kid. And we did like a very tight one shot, you know, 90-minute recording. I'd edit it down to an hour. I'd put music in and they, you know, I'd edit out my setup, but like they would go from, I don't know what D&D is, but I'm down, let's try it. But because, you know, the magic of editing, you make them the world's best comedians, right? Like in a podcast format, in a pre-recorded format, you can edit. And so I can go down. I was like, you know what? That joke was super funny, but it got stepped on. So I'm going to fix that. Or, hey, that thing that happened, if I put some music under that, it's going to be way funnier. It was an absolute blast to make. The kind of thing I only could have done during the pandemic because labor of love, man, so much work to take people playing a game they never played before that is about improvising things and rolling dice and lots of like, wait a second, how does that work? And then trying to edit it down to something listenable without professional performers. An insane amount of editing. It was probably 6 to 8 hours of editing per episode.
Yeah, I was going to
You
ask
know?
about that because I did listen to an episode
Oh my
and,
gosh, I
and
cannot believe that you did that. I can't believe you did that.
no, it's quite entertaining, but
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine it would have taken a bit of editing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the magic is in the editing. I mean, people are great for showing up, but the magic is in the editing. It's the difference between, you know, I went to a live improv show and it was so much fun. And about 75 minutes in, I was just done. I was like, this has been amazing and I'm oversaturated. I'm leaving. But there's something magical about improv plus editing. I'm going to put you in a situation where you're going to improvise funny things in funny situations, but I'm going to have the editing rights at the end to cut down and make big moments big and small moments small and cut things that didn't work. That's magical.
Yeah, yeah, that would must have been interesting.
Yeah.
And it takes long enough for me to edit mine, but I'm a bit of a picky person when it comes to how the language flows and the conversation flows. So
Sure.
that's what
Yeah.
most of mine comes. I don't do any, obviously, of the music or anything, but I have thought about trying to do something like that.
Yeah. It's funny that the guy with the daily email, his name is Jonathan Stark. He'll occasionally send out a podcast episode. He's got friends in the industry and he brings them on. He deliberately does not edit his podcast episodes because he's betting on simplicity and authenticity being the only things that win in a world where the bottom has dropped out of the market for things that are complex and creative. He's like, oh, the simpler and the less edited, the better because people will pay for authentic experiences.
Yeah, I think that's important. In fact, I'm starting a business here, a life writing business. And part of the advantage of that is, you're telling real people's stories. So AI is left out of that whole
Yeah.
process basically. But yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things I edit this for is the authentic feel, right? So I mean I do use the editing software to remove a lot of times the ums and the, but then I sometimes bring them back if the flow of the language doesn't sound right.
I recorded my own audiobook, which was horrifying. It's so much fun and also an experience of I'm going to spend about 48 hours in a room with a person that I love and trust because I did a lot, like I recorded with an engineer there. And I'm going to pay this person because their labor and their expertise is worth money, knowing that we might listen to it and go, nope, it might just not work.
Yeah.
But I essentially got a full edit, post editor. Like I got a full edit of my own book by reading it out loud because I would be like, well, that sentence is weird. I don't like that sentence I wrote now that I'm speaking it out loud. So I'm going to slightly modify the sentence. And for dialogue, absolute game changer. Having to perform the dialogue made the dialogue so much better than it was.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and you can tell if someone's not done that and you're listening to a narrated
Yep.
version because
Well, because that poor narrator, it's not their fault. They had to read
exactly.
whatever shit you wrote.
Yeah, it's weird because in a lot of the how to write books, they'll say, okay, you can use he said, she said, because that's not an issue when you're reading.
Attributions,
But
man.
when you're narrating it, that is very, like if you're listening to an audiobook
Horrifying.
and he said, she said, he said, it's really grating.
hmm
Uh,
I wrote a book that has significant sections written in industry standard screenplay format. So certain sections are
right.
written as scenes and certain sections are just written as regular prose. The audiobook and the print version will be necessarily slightly different in two ways. One is that I call for music in the print version that I obviously can't afford the mechanical licenses to
Right.
put into my audiobook, nor do I want to encounter whatever ninth circle of hell like Audible ACX sends you to when they think you've used a Journey song or something, you know. There's sound design in the audiobook, but we found things that were similar or different or whatever. We amplified moments using royalty-free great music made for that purpose. So I had to cut that. But I also cut an insane number of dialogue attributions because it's obvious, it should be obvious in a performed audiobook who is talking. Whereas in a book that people are reading and often sometimes skimming, we're all guilty of it too, right? Like you have to put in a little bit extra layer of like, okay, wait, who is this? But I don't think I mean, maybe it's a hot take. Like I don't think the audiobook and the print version should be identical. I think because the audiobook is being performed.
Yeah, and that's becoming a newer thing now again. So for quite a while it was just narrated, and maybe they got like a famous person to narrate it or maybe not. But I do see that trend now coming in where it's separating itself from the print version by the
Yep.
performance basically, which I like, to be honest.
Repetitive elements in print should be cut in the audio. Repetitive elements in print are not grating. Repetitive elements in audio are extremely grating. But I was meeting up with a friend who does audio work, not the guy I worked with on the audiobook, but he asked like, it's funny, like why don't more people do these like hybrid? It's not a full cast recording, it's not a audio drama. It is a audiobook with music and sound effects under key moments and key scenes only.
Hmm.
Still very expensive and time consuming to make, but not nearly as much expensive as a full production with its own Foley, right? That would be wild. Like, why don't more people do it? I was like, one, it's expensive. Two, I'm sure people have tried. It just hasn't caught on. Like, one, I got there by accident for this reason, because we talked about like audio and print being different. The reverse is also true, going from audio back to print. So it's like in print, a section written in screenplay format, Courier Prime, Courier New, whatever my interior designer ends up using to make it look like screenplay, is very obviously a scene. And when I transition out of it, the transition is very obvious because we're back in serif font, structured, justified prose. In the audio, they're indistinguishable. So I actually had to put ambiance and sound effects and room tone under those sections so that the listener understands when I am in or not in a certain section of the book. It's like, well, I think if you approach the two formats from first principles, which as a self-publishing author who is privileged enough to be able to pay people to help me when I need them, I was able to approach the print and the audio as separate works from the same source material, basically. But like the manuscript's the manuscript. Here it is. It's basically pretty close to what I had printed from our beta readers. But from there, we made two very different things. A final print version that I hope is beautiful and gorgeous and is on shelves, and an audio version that I'm really proud of, but I was able to make it different where it counted.
So I guess we can move into your book now. I had a couple questions to start before we get into the
Yeah,
sort of
sure.
themes of it. Well, I guess one would start there because I did notice that the screen, what do you call it? The screenplay
Screenplay. Yeah, yeah.
segments of it. Why did you choose that? So it usually happens more or less at the beginning of each chapter.
Yep. Yep. So
Um,
there are six parts in the book where we ended with a lot of help from editors who, God bless them, didn't tell me, please cut this, you idiot. They were like, okay, if this is what you want to do, here's a good way to do it. The beginning of there's six parts in the novel. At the beginning of each part is sort of an extended section of screenplay. It's its own self-contained scene. It might switch settings a couple of times. It's a big set piece, let's call it that. But then, as kind of like a hack, you can communicate so much more in a very short scene than you can in regular prose. So most chapters have a scene heading. Interior, 37th floor, Rhine district. Soft rain against a foggy window. Characters lying on a sofa that creaks. We hear this. I'm able to sort of also in screenplay tell you what to think because screenplay is a very descriptive medium,
right.
whereas prose is a little bit more abstract. So that's where we ended up is little short scene sections at the beginning of each chapters to set the mood, and then these big set pieces, six times it's called. The reason it happened is I had never written a book before, and it's a wonderful and horrifying process that took me many years, not of writing. Most of the time was spent stuck,
Sure.
confused, not liking it, all these moments. And occasionally I would get stuck and would remember that I have no formal training in writing whatsoever. I got it all by accident, except I was taught the formal tools of screenwriting in 2 semesters in college from a really great professor. And it's kind of like you reach for your training when you're stuck. And the only training I had was in screenwriting. So if I got stuck, I was like, I don't know how to write this part, but I can kind of see it. And so I can write it as screenplay. I can write it as a short scene. So I write it as a short scene, intending the entire time, this is something I did as a bridge to become unstuck and to get to the next part that I can write. I'll have to come back and convert these. And some of them I did, and some of them I came back and I'm like, this is too good. It got worse when I tried to convert it. So it stayed in there, and then it's somewhere, and this is years in the making, right? At some point, you're like, man, if I'm not gonna get a publisher, why do I care? Like if this is normal or good or accepted or whatever, like I can write whatever I want. I'm the one who's gonna being promoting it at the end. Like I'm foregoing the process of trying to find an agent and a publisher and all these things. So I should just do that. The concern was always like, Well, what if people have never read a screenplay, which I recommend everybody does, because again, like, the screenplay of Chinatown is better than the movie, and I'll fight people on that. Like screenplays are their own art form. So I left them in there. The worry being, well, but then they'll be confused. They won't know what they're reading because they've never read a screenplay. They weren't taught. Turns out a really good screenplay is kind of self-evident what's happening, even if you don't understand what INT period means, or if you don't understand, like, well, wait, why is the dialogue in the middle, and why is there a parenthetical, and all that? What does cut to black mean?
Yeah.
What are these camera directions? It's like remembering that, like, hey, people are pretty good at picking up the gist of what's going on, even if they don't understand the exact mechanics. In the same way that they don't need to understand whether or not you're using an Oxford comma to be able to read your list, you
Yeah.
know?
One of the things I really like about independent publishing is the ability to experiment, really.
Yeah.
And you get that
Yeah.
option to, and I think it's great for the industry to move things forward a bit or in different directions. Maybe not always forward, but somewhere
Yeah.
creatively different. Yeah.
I had
That's
a
great.
similar moment in the middle of the screenplay sections when you're taught. I was taught from a spec screenplay writer, and this was way back in 2007, 8, 9, somewhere around there. And the first rule of spec screenwriting is never call for an actor, never compare a character to an actor or actress, never call for specific music, never call for music at all, and never write camera directions because those are not your job. You're
Right.
writing a story, and the story will get optioned, and then it will get bought, and then you'll be paid 10K to rewrite it, and then but that'll be the last you ever see, and then it will go into turnaround, and nothing will ever happen. But don't give away your lack of experience by making these rookie mistakes. And so, like, early, I was like, well, no, I can't. What I hear some music here, and I hear, ABBA's Money, Money, Money here is what I hear. And like, it was a little anachronistic because this is a future story, but that's what I hear. Maybe it's fun and funny. Ah, no, I can't do that. And then you're like, wait a second, why not? I'm not selling this to anyone. It's like my screenwriting professor is not going to show up and say, what did we talk about? Like, I can do whatever I want. Like, it was a very freeing deciding early that I was not going to try to get any traditional publisher to do anything with this at all was really freeing because it just meant if I think it's good, it can be in there.
Yeah, it was interesting that as well, to be honest, because I think you did have a number of ABBA ones in there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
one
yeah.
of them was someone was listening to a Gothic symphonic version of Electric
Yeah.
Dancing Queen or something.
Yeah, Brand has. There's one character in the book. His name is Brand. He's my stand. Everybody's got a stand-in, right? He's totally my author stand. There's real people that influence that portrayal. He's a lawyer, right? I'm not a lawyer, but he's my guy. I love that character so much, and the only thing he wants to do at the beginning of the story is get home because he has downloaded a like binary that he can print the vinyl of at his home that is this like, and it's really based on something I did, right? Like the cultural touchstone for this story in the future is the late 80s and early 90s. Like that is the vibe I wanted. So that's the music I was listening to. And some of that kind of leaked in. And ABBA wasn't, late 80s, early 90s, but ABBA Gold was. And him loving this, like, the idea that somebody in the future that I don't know if you've ever done this, but like sometimes I'll go trace the samples in music. Like, oh, I love that song. And then I'll look at the Wikipedia and it's like, actually, this is sampling this song. It's like, so then I go back and find that song. It's like, well, actually, that song was a cover of this. And you're like, and you go back further, like, so I was imagining somebody in the future loving an artist's avant-garde mashup work that's reverent of past eras of music, especially in a world where music copyright is essentially dead because there's no longer a governing entity to enforce it. But it's like, oh, how cool would it be if he also spent his downtime listening to ABBA so that he understood where the musical references and the music he loves are coming from?
Yeah, that's interesting. So two things there. One is copyright may be dying in the music industry. From
Yeah,
I follow
yeah,
another guy on YouTube
yeah.
who's in the industry, and there's a new term I forget what they use now, but it allows them, I guess, to get around this idea of copyright, but they still basically take chunks of someone's music.
It's like there's rules about like mechanicals. It's like how little of a section, it's like so
Yeah.
like there's a in the next book. It's going to be a series. And the next book, I've really been loving Styx, a Renegade, because it just fits the storyline really well. And I was like, oh man, well, if I do another audiobook and maybe I'll have, can I afford? No, they probably would. They can't deny you the right to use it, I don't think, but also like who knows the process of actually getting permission and like whatever that is. People do it, but it's probably asininely expensive. And I was like, well, I know a lot of musicians. Could I just have somebody like make me the movie trailer version of Renegade? Or like, hey, can you just give me the vocal? Because I have a lot of friends who are excellent singers. Turns out like mechanical royalties, like mechanical licenses are pretty easy to get. The right to perform it.
Hmm.
And if you perform it, you own the performance part of the copyright,
Right. Yeah.
provided you're set up to do so. The songwriter like must get credit always. But yeah, it was fun writing a character who actually is a wonk about legal matters because it gave me an excuse to like go down rabbit holes and be like, well, actually, what is the law now and how has it changed and how might it change in the future? But it's like I imagine the future in which there is no federal government and the federal government therefore has no funding and cannot, and all these like independent corporate run city states spring up that it wouldn't be like, oh, it's not illegal anymore. It's like, no, 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 it's still illegal. And also, there's no one left to enforce the legality of it. So
Right.
it's like you can just get away with things. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like the Napster era. It's like, well, until they cracked down, it's just like, oh, yeah, well, just everyone's breaking the law. And because they can't prosecute everyone, you can't really stop it. The difference between it's like in my world corporately, I deal with a lot of like sometimes HR and people and like legal matters because I take that work off of the plate of very beleaguered CEOs. And there's this huge trend of people using ChatGPT as like their lawyer. I like lawyers. I know a lot of lawyers, and when I have a question, I call them and I happily pay their fees, of course, out of the corporate, out of the coffers of the company, but I happily pay the fees because lawyers know something that ChatGPT doesn't, which is what usually happens. It has nothing to do with how the law is written.
Hmm.
The actual thing is precedent. Oh, well, this process will take about 2 years because nobody ever wrote it down or nobody would admit to it. But actually, what will happen is we'll do this, then they'll do this, then we'll do this, then they'll do this. It's like the difference between rules as written and how things usually happen in the real world is what I think experts, to harken back to that previous conversation, those are things that only experts know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's I just wanted to say also that going back to the ABBA part, I actually tried to AI generate something that I thought would give me an idea of what that would sound like. So,
Oh, did you?
so
It's funny.
I couldn't
My,
actually use the lyrics because obviously
of
it's copyright.
course.
So one of them to do generate a new
But
set of
yeah, I
lyrics.
think
But
I like
yeah,
just described like the world's most bizarre. I cannot have it in front
I
of me,
know.
but it's like, oh, like gothic,
Yeah,
like
Gothic
a
symphonic.
gothic symphonic metal mashup of reinterpretation of ABBA's Gold. But like, hey, if copyright was dead, there'd be a whole cottage industry of people reimagining shit that previously they couldn't do because there were a lot of legal implications of doing it. I have an uncle who insists on everybody's birthday they get like an AI generated thing of themselves, and it's absolutely horrifying in like an uncanny valley way. And I'm like, ugh. But it's the same uncle that would send like e-cards. It's like it's the same energy, right?
Yeah,
And like I don't, people send me things that ChatGPT wrote, and I don't read them because I don't care what ChatGPT wrote. People keep turning things into me that they haven't read. It's like, well, if you haven't read it, I'm not going to read it. But my one like absolute guilty pleasure is occasionally getting a song generated off of some joke somebody put in a group chat. And I understand that the death count of trees I have murdered,
yeah. Just
and
today.
somewhere the desert is getting drier. But it's like I listen, I understand the appeal of being able to make something, especially something silly, really quickly. If it were regulated out of existence, I wouldn't be sad. But I totally get the joy of being able to make something really fast that otherwise would have taken you days
Yeah, just to see what happens and what
just
it
to
looks
see what
like. Yeah.
happens. Yeah. It's been so fun for the audiobook because in order to my poor editor, a sound designer, in order to make their life not hell, I went through my book again and said like what I hear. It's like, hey, that we'll have fewer rounds of revisions if I take the first shot at describing what I think happens in the scene. And then you figure out what you can really do that's reasonable. And then I'm like, yeah, pretty close. Thank you. This was excellent. Great work. Sometimes he thinks of things I never would have thought of. But that meant I got to pull up like a royalty-free music site, like the kind that gets used in videos all over the world and certainly all over YouTube. And I got to play my narration because I had a first run edit of the audiobook with no sound design. And then like play different tracks under that and be like what the right music does to a certain moment. And like similar thing, like, well, I can't type in give me an ABBA. Like I have to type in like, well, what is ABBA? Like, okay, 70s retro rock, but also pop, but also has a piano in it. It's like, how do I describe ABBA music? It's like I used to before Spotify, like I was a huge Pandora user. And Pandora, like they were like people behind the scenes trying to use language to categorize music so it could tell you what music was like other it was the music genome project they called it. And like that was like, oh man, dream job. I get to go like listen to a song and then try to use commonly accepted definitions to with words describe what the music sounds like such that a computer could then say, well, that song is actually very genomically similar to this song, so you'll probably like it too.
Yeah, yeah. It's, it's crazy. I think we should probably get into your book a little bit because we're
Yeah,
gonna we're
I
gonna
mean,
run out of time here as that's gonna have to go
probably,
soon.
yeah.
So I have a couple. I'm probably going to touch on sort of three different topics quickly, and then we'll go to the big question. But it is called The Mess. So I wanted to ask you because, well, we'll get you to do a summary in a second, but it is a cyberpunk story. I've got a description of cyberpunk imagining of a near future America that is taken over by corporate power. And the book explores the excesses of capitalism and the political economic dangers of technology. I was curious why you chose cyberpunk and not, for example, a lit RPG, given your D&D background.
You know what's funny is every time I have to carefully avoid the live wire because I'm working with an excellent book coach who's helped me find, lots of folks to work with. And she described it as lit RPG. I was like, no, 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 no. It's like, no, no, it's not that at all. Like lit RPGs are great. I love lit RPGs. Like Dungeon Crawl Carl, come on, But that's not this at all. It has no lit RPG elements whatsoever. However, the reason people think it is this world, literally this is how it started. I was like, man, I love playing tabletop RPGs with friends, and I love really great performers. Let me go find some performers who I love in my orbit and say, can we tell a story together? I love improvisational storytelling. I love tabletop RPGs. Let's do that together. Great, you guys are committed. Okay, good. What genre do you want to play in? And they said cyberpunk. And so I built a very lightweight cyberpunk world based on some ideas I'd had. I described that world to them, and then we played 2 sessions, and we never played again because that's what happens to 99% of tabletop RPG groups. But those characters and that world stuck with me for years, and I was like, okay, I just need to tell that whole story now. We came up with this as a group. Now I just need to tell this story. And so, not very much of what we actually did in that world survived. It's mostly like, oh, I liked that world so much, I just want to tell a story in it. So Cyberpunk was totally by accident, but it turns out, you get far enough down any path and you're like, oh, I have a lot more thoughts about this than I thought I did. And, if you're going to tell a story about corporate abuse of power and the capitalism's poisonous influence on things when taken too far, it helps to have spent your career working in companies and working very close with CEOs and boards because you just sort of see the best and the worst of
Right.
what happens. And so that was the seed of it was an actual tabletop RPG. It was a powered by the apocalypse game system. I was like, oh, I want to use PBTA because PBTA is great. It's very simple. It's like a 2D6 system. But I want it to be cyberpunk. It was like, oh, well, you need, somebody in a game store. I was like, let me find that for you. Like, here's the game system, which was great. But like, again, we played 2 sessions and everybody scattered.
Yeah, so that was the sort of seed of it. Was there some personal inspiration from your work? Because you mentioned, corporate America and obviously your understanding of that and your observations
Yeah.
and experiences there. Was there something particularly that then pushed you into this book from there? Like,
Yeah.
or was it just a sort of a natural extension?
Initially, it was much more legally focused. Like it was going to be all like through the lens of a legal case. And then I dropped that conceit after the while because that frame wasn't helping me. The so like the it's more like here's a group of people I want to put in a room. And what would happen? And how would I connect them and what story would bring them together? Honestly, it really came together when I don't think of him as a villain. The story definitely has a villain. I think of him as an idiot, but a very powerful idiot. And there was somebody in my life who I'm still very good friends with that I had watched in an organization we work at. He was like the greatest dude, so great, so caring. And then he got promoted and he became an absolute asshole. And there was this idea of, was he always an asshole? Or did actually the organization crush him into the shape of an asshole because it needs an asshole in that role? Because I noticed, like, man, the minute you got promoted to this level of leadership, you started acting like all these other people that I don't like. It's like, oh, well, hey, if you work at a company, what gets corrected and what gets rewarded is everything. And culture is what you allow, right? So there was this whole theory of my friend I don't love the way he's acting in his role. Also, this is partially because anyone promoted into that role would start acting like that. Like organizations shape people. They have a will and they force people into certain molds and they start acting certain ways. That's, I didn't really have a book until I had that because I needed an antagonist. It's like, oh, I need somebody who will never back down, has no idea what they're doing, and is just sort of faking it till they make it. Because it turns out those people can do a lot of damage in a very short period of time.
Yeah, it's interesting the bad apple idea because I did take a course on this some years ago when I
Oh,
was still
cool.
doing a lot of online courses, and it's one
Yeah.
of the things they did stress, and the question was put sort of, well, is it actually a bad apple or is it the environment and that it breeds people into bad
Yes.
apples
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that is yeah, what's basically what you're saying, and that's the same conclusion that they were presenting as well, is that typically and in corporations it's bad enough. You breed a sort of the whole atmosphere breeds bad
Yes.
apples.
Yeah.
In politics, it's really terrible. I
Yeah.
would suggest even
Absolutely.
worse.
It's like doesn't matter how amazing the campaign is. The minute they get in the office, they just start. It's like, oh well, heck, actually, I worked for a nonprofit that did a lot of work with educational systems. Incredible organization, but all nonprofits are horrifying to work at. They're nightmares on the inside. But the work was really great. And a lot of the work was about understanding the role that systems and structures play. And like a large corporation or a government is just a large set of interconnected systems and structures. And there are slots in the structure for people. But we should treat systems and structures more like the, you know, Cthulhu level demigods that they are, right? Like the systems and structures have a lot of power and they often survive. It's like the ship of Theseus, like every staff member has turned over, but the thing's still running. It's like, well, yeah, that's systems and structures. We like to think that we put 20 people in a room and say, make a company. And it's like, ah, well, the company is the 20 of us working together. It's like, actually, the company is a weird god behind the scenes that is acting on the people who work there, even as the people act on the company. And it's like, I think I have a fear that corporations are unkillable. They die every 10 years on average. But the idea of the corporation, board governed, executive led, hierarchical, beholden to shareholders, is probably an unkillable idea. So if we can't kill it, it would be good to understand, hey, this might turn people into bad actors.
Yeah, no, I think of them as emergent properties almost. So it
Yes,
is
that's a
like
better way of
yeah,
saying it.
it's an
Yes.
entity that arises from the components of its of sub entity.
Yes.
In the
Yeah.
UK, because of our highly condensed nature, it's
Yeah.
more obvious over here the political structure and how that arises. So the strange thing was there was a comedy series called Yes Minister, in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And it dealt with this kind of thing where a guy got into power, became the prime minister, and he's basically trying to navigate around his kind of assistant who keeps telling him, no, you can't do this because
Yep.
of these reasons. And apparently the creators of this show were told by people in the government that it was highly accurate, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what's come to realize, people have come to realize in the UK is that, yes, it doesn't matter really who gets into power. You have this civil service that is doing what it's going to do.
Yes.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure it's similar in the US and probably Canada
It's
as
it's a
well. But
big it's a
yeah,
big machine. It's like we're cutting out inefficiency. It's like, no, you were cutting out the part that actually was doing work.
yeah, exactly.
You are an
Yeah.
interchangeable part, but these people down here actually are the government. It's like the big takeaway is like, hey, incentives really matter, and runaway incentives really matter a lot. And at some point, you escape the ability to be governed. I just read a book from a guy who, Jeffrey Pfeffer's, the name of the book is Power, and it's like an embarrassing book to have on your shelf. But it's by a professor talking about like, hey, power dynamics are real in organizations. Also, it's increasingly common now for CEOs to gain control over their boards. The whole point of a board is to have control over the CEO. But with enough power and enough allies, you can essentially escape the structure. And that is, I think, when people become truly dangerous, is when they escape the structure that's supposed to govern them.
And that's what we're seeing. Well, to some degree in politics, they've seemed to have made a decision to escape being beholden to the people.
Yep.
So there is still the
Yep.
structure there, but the structure does what it's going to do. And I feel like it happened a little bit before COVID, where all of a sudden the politicians just decided, well, okay, we want to do this and we're not going to listen to people anymore. Right?
Yeah.
We're going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
tell you what you think, and then we're going to tell you you're wrong if you don't think the same way as us, right?
Yeah.
We're just not
Yeah.
listening to you anymore.
I saw, and I don't have the details here, so we can't go very deep into it. But like, I saw a story, something about trans rights, very hot button issue, and they had put it out to a vote, and 29 of 30 people voted against it, and then they went ahead and did it. It's like, well, hey, why? Sorry, I assumed that if there was a vote, that that's a supermajority. Like, I assumed that the vote even if the vote was simply to inform you of the preferences of the people affected by the decision, why would you? What was the? Don't do the vote if you're unwilling to be bound by the results of the vote. Like now you just look evil.
Yeah.
It's like the corporations, governments, they end up with some like vestigial organs, right? It's like, yes, well, depending on who you ask, the Electoral College in the US is like it doesn't seem to matter unless it does, and some people daylight savings time, a more innocuous
That's
example,
funny.
right? Yeah, it's like, oh, it's really hard to get rid of this, but it would be harder to get rid of it than just to live with it. Although we all kind of agree it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. But there's one really loud guy in Nebraska saying we absolutely can't live without it. And so let's just leave it be.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because we've had the issues of the votes on a few issues here in the UK. I mean, one of the ones that's coming in next year, I guess, which brings several of the topics together, is the digital ID, I suppose. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of resistance here to the point of a 3 million strong petition that went
Jeez.
before the government.
Yeah.
And they basically had the king just come out and say, yeah, we're doing it. So this doesn't matter, right? No, no,
Yeah.
we're
It's
going
like,
ahead. It's going to happen.
okay. And
Yeah.
the purpose of an executive, whether it's a king or an executive as a corporate or a president, like that role has a well-designed or a well-understood role of being able to say, I'm going to take the heat. We just got to do this. I worked for a very large nonprofit, and they gave somebody a platform. Like they brought somebody on stage to talk who shouldn't have been allowed to talk because it was like very divisive, very off topic, and like very horrifying what this person said to a large crowd. And the chief executive of the nonprofit was like, listen, I understand a lot of people had a hand to make this happen. I accept responsibility. It's all on me, which we think of as a noble thing to do. And I said, you just absolved 15 people who should have known better of any guilt and any repercussions from a very bad decision. And there's a term for that. We've all heard of diffusion of responsibility. It's the bystander problem. Well, if we're all responsible, then no one's responsible for a given thing. Tragedy of the commons is a common example of that. There's also displacement of responsibility. And it's especially bad when someone says, don't worry, everyone. I take full responsibility. Also, there is no mechanism to punish me for anything. So what I actually did is I did something terrible twice. I made myself unaccountable to anyone. And also, I can constantly take the blame for everything. And therefore, a whole bunch of people who should face consequences also won't face consequences.
Yeah, I suppose the sad thing there is we have a system right now where they don't take the blame and they don't face consequences,
Yes. Yeah,
which
it's like,
is
well, it's not me.
the
It's not,
worst of
it's, I
everything.
didn't do
Yeah.
it. And also you can't hold me accountable also. And anybody who said I did something bad, they're lying.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, it can't go on forever, but it's
No, that's
pretty bad
true.
right now.
That's true. Yeah. We are almost out of time. I'd love to have you back on so because there's so many more things I want to discuss.
Sure.
So maybe
Sorry
once
for
the
rambling.
no, maybe once the
That'd
book is released,
be
I can have
great.
you
I would love
back.
that.
And yeah,
Yeah,
we can
that'd be
get
great.
into some more of the political stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great.
So I wanted to touch on one big question, then we'll give you a chance to plug your stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And so in relation to what we were just talking about, one of the things that bothers me about authoritarianism is it kind of ignores the what I'll call the human capital, which I would say is the vast processing power of the human collective. And so the only way I see forward, like I think we all agree that weird stuff's happening now. We're in a really bad place globally. And the only way I see forward is if we find a way to effectively harness this, right? Sort of the opposite direction of what most governments are going in, which is excluding the people. I was wondering, given that the governments are excluding us, and given that they've put their manipulations and machinations in play for decades in some cases, and they have all these, departments of behavioral psychology to manipulate us and everything, do we, the average citizen, do you think, do we actually have a chance against these powers? Or we just have to wait till everything collapses and we can try and rebuild something that looks better?
Yeah, yeah. I think that the best thing we can do is exactly what we are doing, which is talking about it, right? I think a lot of the problems that we have currently are a result of people increasingly being fed only things they already agree with. It's like, oh, I have essentially gone to a place where algorithmically I'm only going to be fed things that get a reaction out of me, which sort of separates me from what's really going on.
And it's really sad too, because you can't escape that bubble very
No,
easily.
very, very tough. And I don't think the answer is like, well, I think there's America especially, but certainly the whole world, very free market system. If it didn't work and it didn't generate dollars, they wouldn't be doing it.
Right. Yeah.
Um, we are watching systems that amplify that which is worst about us. So if the technologies are simply amplification, the ability to amplify, the ability to gain leverage, that's what every tool is, right? A hammer is better than trying to hammer the nail with my fist. So like it is just a tool that extends me in some way. I think there is a role for awareness, being aware that when you are on YouTube, you are being manipulated. Doesn't mean you can't go on YouTube. It's you need to walk in with a bit of wariness. Also means when you go to work for a company, be aware that you are being manipulated. And actually, it's even worse because there is no person manipulating you. It would be easy if it's like that person is trying to hurt me. No, no, no. You're in an environment that is designed to get an output out of you. And it will strip you bare and hollow you out if it can, because it doesn't care about you. A company is incapable of caring. Is it better to say, I wish we had more compassionate politicians, or to recognize that the role of a politician was never to be compassionate? The role of a politician was to hold power. I look forward to a world in which people are more aware of how they are being influenced and manipulated, because that will make influencing and manipulating less effective, which means the people in power will have to find other ways to gain and hold it.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point you brought there, which talks to the other stuff earlier, in that by saying, "Oh, we wish we had more compassionate politicians," we are still putting the responsibility on the politicians
Yes.
rather than taking the responsibility
Yeah.
ourselves. And now the one question, I guess, do have to finish here, but the one question is, I mean, we are kind of taught that way through the school system. So from some perspective, almost homeschooling is kind of
Yeah.
it was just very chaotic, but there has to be a way to escape that system almost from the beginning, because we know that the school systems, as an example, are more or less designed to build workers who will then go into the system and comply. And we want people to be able to think for themselves so they know the system they're entering and can act effectively.
It's like, it is possible. This is the hardest thing. People, they surrender. I've heard somebody refer to what I see happening with younger folks in ChatGPT as cognitive surrender. They're just surrendering the responsibility for thinking about something. They just go to the answer machine, and the answer machine gives them an answer. And then they hand in the answer as if it's their own. Well, you didn't do any work. But cognitive surrender is not new. Cognitive surrender is also what someone does when they say, like, well, that's what the local mayor says. That's what the president said, so it must be true. Well, I saw it posted on the internet. It must be true. They're refusing to do work. It doesn't make them bad. It just means they refuse to do work. We can't do all the work. We'd be exhausted. On the other hand, you have people who are like, can't trust anybody. It's the government, man. It's like, well, this is all a system of control. The mature thing is actually to integrate those perspectives. We live in a society. We have to participate in it. That's really the only option. But we can also participate in the world that we're in with an active knowledge that we are subject to a lot of systems of control, and to understand that in some cases we are the person in control and need to act ethically and responsibly with the control we have over others. I wish the answer was not, I'll flip it back on you because, like, well, we have an educational system that kind of enforces some of these things. Again, nobody designed it that way. It just sort of became that way through a lot of people's choices. I do think the answer is still education. Educate your kids not to surrender when they should fight, and educate your kids to recognize that it is possible to participate in a system that's unfair and still do so ethically.
Yeah, you're asking for a balanced perspective from people, which is a challenging thing these
Really
days.
hard. Very, very difficult when there's so much money to be made in the binary.
Yeah, no, exactly. And opportunities for control as well.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to leave it there for this time, unfortunately, because it was some very interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But it has been great chatting with you. Before you go, perhaps you could remind us when your book is due out. Let us know if you're working on anything else, where to find you online, and if you'll be at any upcoming events.
Yeah, I am JP Prince on Blue Sky, and you can find, it's a very simple website, jpprince.com. You can go there. If the book isn't out by the time you're hearing this, then you'll have a way to sign up and be notified. Otherwise, I'm very much hoping that when you go to jpprince.com, you'll see a link to the audiobook, which I'm very, very proud of and very excited about. And then we'll have a print version later this fall.
Excellent. JP Prince, thanks so much for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.